Hi guys, so before we get into it, a couple of quick disclaimers. Firstly, there will be mild spoilers today, and secondly, you'll find all my other reviews of Stephen King adaptations in my Stephen King playlist. So this is the fourth Children of the Corn film I have covered for this review series, and I'm still waiting for a bad one. I feel like I've been trolled by certain people in the comments. Like a few weeks ago, there were a few messages along the lines of, oh, it soon goes downhill very quickly with Children of the Corn. You'll soon get fatigue covering those movies. You'll regret the day you ever took on Children of the Corn. Well, I'm not feeling that so far, and we're now 4 movies in at this point. This one was directed by Greg Spence. This was his directorial debut, so they definitely went with the cheap option here. As far as I can tell, this guy was a company man within the ranks of Miramax in the 90s, and he got to such a high position that eventually they offered him the chance to direct this movie. And he obviously really impressed the bigwigs with what he produced here, because it was on the back of this that they then gave him the chance to do another film called The Prophecy 2, which was his final film as a director. So it was a short and sweet journey for him. I don't know if he just cocked up that second film or whether he decided that directing wasn't for him. But what I would say is that Children of the Corn 4 was obviously a minor success for this guy within the direct-to-video horror market. The plot for this is sort of like the Jason Goes to Hell of Children of the Corn, in that we just completely disregard everything that has come before. And I know that that will drive certain people nuts. There are people who watch horror franchises, and in their world, everything has to be neat and tidy. The continuity has to make sense. There has to be recurring characters. Everything has to be in its place. We don't like plot holes or things that make the other movies that have come before look bad. And then you've got people who will watch horror movies quite randomly. They'll just stick on Children of the Corn 4 without having watched any of the others, and they don't care whether the continuity is in the right place or not. Me personally, I'm kind of in the middle of both camps. I like a good on-running saga like what you get with Michael and Laurie Strode in Halloween, but at the same time, I can watch Halloween 3, which doesn't give a jig for Halloween 1 and 2, and I'm absolutely fine with that. This is the first time in this series, by the way, that we've had a supernatural child killer, so I guess that makes this film the Jason Lives of the Children of the Corn franchise as well. That's the final Friday the 13th reference today I'm going to give you. So yeah, we've got this kid who is brought back to life. He comes back to life as a ghost. He doesn't actually come back as a zombie or anything, but he's just in the area as this supernatural being once he's been resurfaced somehow, and he's killing people with a scythe, but he's also using telepathy to poison the minds of all the human kids in the area. So he's creating a little army for himself, I suppose. But this is definitely different from the fully human child armies of the first 3 movies. And on the human side, on the good guy side, I should say, we've got this character called Grace, a young woman in her 20s who's returning to her hometown just in time for this problem situation. This hometown, by the way, is the town of Grand Island. And this is an example of how they just completely disregard what's come before, because in the first few movies, it was Gatlin and it was somewhere else, fictional towns that had actually been used in King's short story, I believe. But this time around, we're using a real-life town in Nebraska. Grand Island is the 4th biggest town in Nebraska. It's very real. But why change the town to this? Because they're pretending in this film that there is some kind of history with killer kids in the area. But if that's the case, then why not just stay consistent to the towns that we were using before? It's kind of baffling. But anyway, Grace gets herself settled in at her mum's house. She takes a job at the local clinic, but this becomes kind of ground zero for all the problems that are going on, because a lot of the kids in the town start falling ill because they're slowly being taken over by the main final boss ghost dude. So Grace becomes the forefront of the fight back against the child army and its leader, and she gets 1 or 2 friends in this film to help her along the way. The plot is actually a bit more convoluted than what I'm giving you. This is actually maybe the most impressive plot of the first four movies because it's quite well thought out, it's quite deep. Like, after the film was over, I went straight on the wiki and just read back everything. And it was like reading a little mini short story in the wiki. It's quite good for a film of this type, I think. It's baffling to me that they put the amount of effort in on this story, and yet they've not just gone that smidgen of an extra mile to make it tie into the first three movies. It's just, I just don't get it personally. And the killer ghost kid, they've brought back this kid from the dead who was not a kid in any of the first three movies. Why not just make him Isaac? That would be a nice little tie-in, right? Grace is played by Naomi Watts. Amazing. So we had Linda Hamilton in the first movie and Naomi Watts in the fourth. She looks very fresh-faced in this. And when I consider that she did The Ring just 6 years after this, she looks totally different in that. So I guess in this one, she looks kind of college age, whereas in The Ring, she's marriage age, but still really young. Apparently, she was only paid like $5,000 to do this, her first lead role, which is not a lot. Even in today's money, that would translate as what, 15,000, 20,000? I'm just guessing, but it doesn't seem like a lot to be a lead role. Just imagine what they pay the lesser important actors. Interestingly, the way that the main ghost comes back to life in this, so his remains are at the bottom of a well, and then a drunkard comes along and accidentally disturbs the well, and the ghost from the remains flies out of the well, and the movie begins. But if you consider, therefore, when Naomi Watts gets to The Ring in 2002, that would be the second time that she was in a horror movie where an entity had sprung up from a well, which is a weird little coincidence. That drunkard character is not in this movie very long. He's basically the first death, but I think they missed a trick with this guy. So he's walking through the cornfields with this half-empty bottle of vodka, a whiskey. He's like, "Ah." But they should have had him singing. You've got to have a character like this singing. Have him walking through the corn like, "My sweetheart is worth 1,000 diamonds." Just adds a bit of colour to the scene. And also, I would have had him killed differently. So going back to Jason Lives yet again, there's a character in that movie, a graveyard keeper, caretaker, who's walking home with a bottle of vodka, drunk as a skunk, and he lobs it over his head. And because he can't hear it fall to the ground, he turns around and that's when he realises Jason has caught it and Jason stabs him with it. They should have had a little tribute to that kill in this film, given that this came out in 1996, like 10 years after Jason Lives. They should have had this guy chuck his bottle, and then he turns around and there's like four kids, and one of them's caught it, and then they kill him. And you know what? One more thing from Jason Lives. So that film starts with a kind of James Bond tribute where Jason walks onto the screen and then just turns left and slashes the camera. It's a tribute to the gun barrel sequence from James Bond. There needed to be a Children of the Corn version where like four kids just walk on and then turn to the camera and just fire a pea shooter or something. That's what I would have. That's how I would have started Children of the Corn 4, The Gathering, just to give the series a bit of oomph at this stage. Tom McLaughlin has got to do a Children of the Corn film. That's what I think. The main child ghost is probably the best villain since the original film, mainly because they don't really give him a personality this time. He's always just off centre. You never really see his face for longer than the briefest possible second, so you never really get used to what he looks like. And he never really speaks throughout the film or has any scenes with dialogue, so he's scarier that way, the fact that we never really get to know him as a person. I realised from watching 2 and 3 that it's very difficult to have child villains who have a lot of dialogue, a very deep personality, because kids just can't produce good villains. They don't have the acting experience. They tend to become too theatrical. I think the casting of Isaac in the first film was a little bit of a fluke in terms of how good he was, and I think he was an adult actor pretending to be a child, I think. But this kid, who is the main villain here, is very effective, and the fact that he is dead, he's a ghost just floating around anywhere, that worked for me. I didn't mind this series becoming that at all. Now, when it comes to the good characters, there's lots of interesting people in this film. Grace is very likeable as a lead, and she's got lots of good, well-written characters backing her up. There's this girl who used to be her friend as a child, and now they've met up again for this movie, and they've got a good rapport. Grace has a very good relationship with the doctor at the clinic. I liked their friendship. And there's this other guy, this black guy, I can't remember his name, but his kid has gone over to the dark side, so he's desperate to get in on the action in terms of fixing this whole problem. So Grace and this guy work together, but they've got an interesting relationship because they're different ages, totally different backgrounds, and probably these two would never like meet or hang out in any other situation in life ever apart from this movie. So I found that very interesting, that dynamic. And there's another good character, a woman who is having visions. Even before this story began, she was having visions that this whole nightmare scenario was going to start happening. And she slowly realizes throughout this movie that it's all coming true. So she has an interesting position in this film as somebody who sort of foresaw everything that was going to happen here. So wherever you look in this film, all across the board, there are decent characters who have good roles to play and are well written. I'm pleased to report that the finale is very strong in this. There's an exciting moment where a car has got to veer off into the cornfield and drive through all the corn stalks. And there are characters who have to band together and fill these guns full of mercury, because apparently mercury harms the kids somehow. I won't spoil everything about the finale, but in my opinion, a genuinely exciting climax. I was on the edge of my seat right up until the final moment. There are a couple of things about this film that drag it down a bit. So the cinematography is not very strong. I remember when I was reviewing the second film, I was glowing about all the gorgeous locations they'd managed to find in South Carolina where they were filming. And this was something about the first film that was also very strong. But this time around, even though we've gone back to the rural setting for the first time since number 2, they've not really found that many interesting places to film in. It doesn't help that a lot of this story is set at night. They shot this one in Texas. Now, that alone is not the reason why it's not a good-looking film. I'm sure there are plenty of gorgeous places in Texas they could use for a film, for any genre. It just so happens in this one, there's just not that many scenes where I was purring at just how gorgeous the scenes had been framed. Another reason for me to just slightly pull my score in a little bit is in the overuse of scenes in the clinic. Now, to be fair, this is part of the story. The kids are slowly getting ill in this film. They're slowly going over to the dark side, so they spend a lot of time in the doctor's surgery. But still, I felt that there were one too many kills in the clinic, more scenes in general in the clinic that there needed to be. I'm guessing that for budgetary reasons, it made sense for them to shoot a lot on this clinic set. But there came a point in the film where I just wanted to get outside a little bit more. You got all of Nebraska to work with, in theory, even though it's secretly Texas. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it's a good-looking film in the same way that the first two were, certainly. But overall, just as a horror movie experience, I liked it. It was a good time. And I felt a little bit sad afterwards, actually, that my Children of the Corn box set is just a trilogy. I wish it was a quadrilogy now, so I could have this decentish horror movie included with that. Right, it's time to get to the bag of terror, so I can show you what sort of score I'm going to give Children of the Corn for The Gathering. Here's the bag. So we've got 1, 2, and 3 Michael Myers carving knives out of 5. A very good score. I always feel like I should have given it a little bit more than this. Maybe my subconscious has just kept the score down a little bit because I'm somewhat embarrassed about how much I'm enjoying these Children of the Corn films. Certainly I was thinking about going as high as 3.5, but I'm going to stick to 3 out of 5, but this is a slight improvement over the score I gave number 3, so the graph has had a little bit of an upswerve, and we'll see how we get on with part 5. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.